Did ya miss me? Yes, I very much did. Alright, it's time to review Doctor Who Series 12, Episode 5, Fugitive of the Judoon, and all I can say is, holy crap! I gotta say, if an episode can make me go like, oh my god, twice? You're doing something good, or at the very least, something interesting. Now, this episode is probably going to be a love it, hate it, or just be confused by it, but overall, this episode really worked for me. It put a lot of balls in the air, asked a lot of questions, and set up a lot of intriguing stuff in a way that I personally found really interesting, and I'm trying to keep it spoiler-free for the moment here. And I think how I'm going to look back on this episode is going to depend a lot on how all of this stuff eventually pays off at the end of the season, at the end of the series. So if it all pays off terribly, I might look back on this episode with a sort of diminished light, because a lot of this is setup, but watching it right now, my initial reaction is, dang, that was fun, it was crazy, it was emotional, it was funny, it was thoughtful. It had everything that I wanted from a Doctor Who episode. It had wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey questions. This episode pretty much just epitomizes like what I love about Doctor Who into one thing, and had some amazing shocks, some surprises, some stuff that personally I really loved, considering a certain character came back that is my favorite character in all of Doctor Who, besides probably the Doctor, him or herself. This episode just worked so well for me, and like I said, that feeling may change dependent on how the rest of the series goes, but as an episode that I just watched today and wanted to enjoy, I enjoyed the crap out of this episode. It was so much fun. So to break it down, I'm not going to do a beat-by-beat plot breakdown like I do for my Picard reviews, just because, especially this week, I'm moving, so I don't really have the time to do a lot of like in-depth breakdowns that I do for other ones. Picard I'm going to try and still do this week, but Doctor Who I'm going to try and just give my initial thoughts and impressions on it, and this is where we are going to get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Fugitive of the Judoon, go watch it. Be totally shocked or confused by it, and then come back and listen to the rest of this review, because I'm going to go in on this thing. First things first on this, I gotta say, Jack is back, and holy crap, the second I heard his voice, I could hear it when he sort of crackling through on the static, and then he appears. I have to say, I literally had to pause the episode and do a dance around my apartment, because I was so excited. Captain Jack is easily one of my favorite characters in Doctor Who. I think he's just a fun, enjoyable, crazy character. I loved him in Torchwood and the sort of torturedness of his character, but also the fun version of him that we got here and in Doctor Who. And I'm just glad to see him back. And I also have to say, as a personal connection, he was one of the first queer representations that I had. So as a queer person, you know, in middle school, high school, to see Captain Jack be so aggressively queer was really a revelation for me and very important for my development. So I do have a very personal connection with that character. Even though I don't identify as pansexual or as a guy anymore, he was still just so foundational to me in discovering my own identity. It was a bit disappointing that Captain Jack was sort of confined to one singular room in this episode, that he wasn't out gallivanting and doing crazy Captain Jack stuff, but I thought that the way that they utilized him in that one room was really fun and crazy, and really starts to build up our anticipation for seeing him later, because I'm sure he's going to come back later this season, and the fact that we didn't get to see him meet the Doctor this episode has really just got me very excited to finally see when they get to finally reunite at some point down the line this season. I'm just so excited for that, and I'm glad that they didn't put all their eggs in one basket, that's going to be a build throughout the rest of the series, that it wasn't like, oh yeah, Captain Jack's back and he's with the Doctor. There's like something a little bit more to look forward to. And I just loved seeing him play off the companions. I loved his mistaking Graham for the Doctor, and just his initial reaction is just to kiss the Doctor. That's perfectly Captain Jack. Like him getting confused about saying like, oh, is Yaz the Doctor? And him being like 3 companions? That's insane, which I know is like a criticism of the show by some. So I thought that was sort of like a fun, like putting a lampshade on it in a very enjoyable way. I loved his interplay with Ryan and just all the companions really. So it was a really fun few scenes with Captain Jack in this episode. Just fantastically done. I could not have asked for a better reintroduction to one of my favorite characters in all of Doctor Who. I am just so happy he's back. So to talk about the rest of the episode really briefly before we get to like the big plot thing that happens at the end of the episode, I have to say it was very solid. I thought that the mystery was fun and intriguing and had just enough twists that it felt intriguing and investing. Like we got to see, this sort of really sweet relationship between Lee and Ruth, and then it kind of being complicated by that Alan guy who is, just that jerk who kind of instigates the plot a little bit, but I could kind of believe him as a character, even though he was kind of there just to like get the Judoon moving on the right track. I really liked seeing the Judoon, especially them speaking English after a certain point. I thought that was like kind of clever, and they were used very effectively here. Like the bureaucraticness of them came through, and I thought that really, really sold well and sort of kept them in character with how we had seen them previously, way back in the 10th Doctor's episode. So I just thought that they were a lot of fun. I liked the Doctor and the companions trying to play off their bureaucraticness, like, yes, Law 12 of Earth Law, and that playing with them in that way I thought worked perfectly and was a lot of fun, especially for an episode that felt very heavy in a lot of parts. Having those like little jokes and little bits and pieces I thought were really, really great throughout this episode. And again, like I said, there was enough twists and turns in it, like how we thought Lee was the fugitive that they were looking for. Turns out he wasn't, and then it turns out it was Ruth. I thought that was all, nothing revelatory. It wasn't like the most insane, crazy plot beats going on, but considering the amount of other stuff going on in this episode, I think that's fine. That it's a functional story that got me invested in it without being so insane that I couldn't follow the thread of the other crazy stuff that was also going on in this episode. So just a really solid job there, and made me invest in these characters very quickly. Again, they didn't light my heart aflame, like I didn't fall in love with the Lee character, but I thought that they did enough to humanize him and make him feel like a fully rounded character throughout the episode. Okay, so with all that out of the way, I have got to talk about that ending. The surprise that Ruth is actually the Doctor, but not a Doctor that makes any sense. A Doctor from the past, the future, who knows, and it's going to get answered at some point in the future. Also, we got the revelation that there's this thing called the Lone Cyberman, which is given to us by Captain Jack, and he's sort of saying beware of that, and if that happens, then we don't really know, but it's sort of like the Cybermen can come back if time doesn't go well, and we get this hint that the person chasing the Doctor is also a Time Lord, but also from the past. There's just a lot of craziness going on here, and I think what it's trying to show us is that time is screwing up. And it makes me think back towards the Master, because a lot of people were questioning, where did the Master come from? Where in the timeline is the Master? Because last time we saw the Master with Missy seemed to have a definitive end, that the Master was dead at that point. So how is the Master back? And now with all this other stuff happening in this episode, with the Doctor, with Time Lord showing up, with the Lone Cyberman, with the Timeless Child being a thing that's popped up, all these mystery boxes. I think that's really clever. It runs the risk of being very, very confusing, but I think what the goal is to show us that something's up. Time is going crazy. And I really like that, because what it tells me is that they are actually playing off the concept of the Doctor Who mystery box. Every series of Doctor Who, give or take a few, has had some sort of like big season-long mystery that builds up and towards the end. But here, we have so many of them going on at once that it's going to be hard to keep them straight. And maybe the show will start paying them off one by one. Or the whole point is, these are mystery boxes that just showing that time is going crazy. Time is really weird. And again, I'm going to be curious to see how all this pays off. If it is like, they're just trying to slot in all these mystery boxes to get us intrigued. And it could end up being a bad gamble on their part. But if the goal is to say, some craziness is going down, and kind of using the conceit of a Doctor Who mystery box to play with that conceit, to sort of play off our expectations of what that would be, that's clever. That's legitimately clever. Not Stephen Moffat trademark clever, like legitimately clever. I thought that would be a great deconstruction of modern Doctor Who, to sort of say something about that mystery box structure. We'll see. Again, that's me kind of thinking about the future, but I kind of got that from within this episode, so I'm really curious to see where that storyline goes. And like I said, it could pay off brilliantly, or it could totally crash and burn. And I think how those eventually pay off will retroactively inform how I think about this episode. But as it is, I think it's great. The other thing I should talk about is this new version of the Doctor with I'll call her Ruth Doctor. I really liked her. She is clearly not the Doctor we know. She's a jerk, she's rude, she's mean, she's willing to let people die. And these are all things that we have all seen the Doctor do before. All of these personality quirks of the Doctor have all been things we've seen. We've seen the cranky Doctor, we've seen the rude Doctor, we've seen the Doctor willing to let someone die even if she's not the one to directly do it. We've seen all of that in different versions of the Doctor, but having it all coalesce into this one version, it's like all the negative, I don't even necessarily want to say negative, but all the negatively connotated traits of the Doctor in one person. And I found that to be interesting because it felt very much like she was the Doctor. She was a version of the Doctor, but she was one that I wouldn't want to be around. And that's interesting. That's super, super interesting to say, hey, look, this is the Doctor. You can definitely see that there are elements of her in there, but maybe not one that you would want to be with. That's cool. That's really, really cool. And the fact that they brought back the gateway arches and things like that. And also, like, Captain Jack also mentioned the nanite things that I think were way back from the episode that he was introduced in, The Empty Child. So there's just all this stuff going on that I think runs the risk of confusing a lot of people, especially people who aren't longtime Doctor Who fans. I'm sure anyone who doesn't follow Doctor Who regularly was going to be like, what in the world is happening here? But for me as a fan who kind of gets all this stuff, I thought it was a lot of fun and very intriguing. And the last thing that I want to end my review on was, I think it was very smart of this show to give us an emotional core to this episode. The opening and closing bookends, where the Doctor is kind of closed off from the companions, but then at the end, the Doctor finally starts opening up to them and says, you don't know me, and feeling like she has to close herself off, and the companions just saying, no, we do know you. We know you right now, rejecting her desire to distance them. They're like, no, we are your family, and we will care for you always, regardless of how much you push us away. I think that was a really strong beat to open and close the episode on, and grounded all this insanity. All this craziness was going on, and yet it still was able to ground me in the relationships between the Doctor and the companions. Make it feel like something tangible that felt like it wasn't just wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey craziness, but actually something that feels emotionally resonant. And that really, really worked for me here as well. So I just think that this episode on pretty much every level for me worked. And again, it's built on a house of cards right now, though. So that house of cards could easily come tumbling down if it's placed incorrectly. But as it stands, I'm intrigued and I'm impressed. And we'll see how they pay it off. And that's my thoughts on this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Did you like The Fugitive of the Judoon? Were you excited by Captain Jack returning? Did you hate it? Were you just confused? Let me know. I'd love to start off that discussion. And if you want to make sure to catch every one of my Doctor Who reviews, my reviews of Star Trek Picard, and also my discussion and analysis of Star Trek and science fiction through the lens of how we can better ourselves as humans, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because all of that's right here on this channel. And if you want to help make these videos even better, please consider giving to my Patreon page or giving to my PayPal account. It would really, really help me out. Like I said, I'm moving this month. I'm actually moving in 2 days from the recording of this video, and also I have surgery coming up, so any financial help really does mean a lot to me. It really goes directly to both of those things and helps me pay the bills. But regardless of if you want to give to my PayPal or Patreon and support me that way, or even if you don't even want to subscribe, I am just glad that you stopped by, and as always, I hope that you live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons, Stefan Schuhart, Michael McGee, Boyd Earl, Lal Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Munir Amlani, BBD, and Mari Nekar.